Hey guys, it's me Simo Urahara, and in this video I'm gonna talk about something very important regarding Ichigo Kurosaki. Being the main protagonist of the story has always enjoyed many unique traits that set him apart from others. Some of these traits, guys, have always been debate among fans, like his techniques and specifically why in terms of his Zanpakuto. He only seems to have one technique, the Getsuga Tensho. That's why, guys, in this video we're going to dive into this topic and explore why Ichigo only uses one main technique in most of his battles. And let's start with the classic answer. Ichigo, after all, a shonen protagonist, and it's pretty common from famous shonen heroes not to have a wide range of flashy techniques. Usually they have one core move, and anything new ends up being just a variation of the same original power or the same original technique. But honestly, guys, if we look beyond that general idea and dig into the story itself, it actually makes perfect sense that Ichigo doesn't have multiple abilities. The reason: he fights as a Shinigami and uses a Zanpakuto, and as we know, Shinigami are beings who live for an incredibly long time, and they need this long lifespan to truly strengthen their Zanpakutos. Because one of the key foundations for unlocking new Zanpakuto techniques is having a strong connection with Zanpakuto spirit. The deeper the bond, the better. But that kind of connection, guys, takes a long time to develop, and that's not even considering the Shinigami's personality and fighting style, whether they're strategic and analytical, or simply rely on raw destructive power without much thought for complex techniques. All these factors combined determined how many abilities a Shinigami can manifest through their Zanpakuto, and I will give you some examples. Take Yamamoto. For instance, as a Shinigami he was ancient, possibly over 6,000 years old, maybe even older. He was around when Zanpakuto were first created. And suddenly, guys, we don't know exactly when these weapons were forged. But imagine these guys. This old man had a Ryujin Jakka since the moment his Zanpakuto was born. That's thousands of years of bonding with it. Not just decades, not just centuries, we're talking millennia. And even though Yamamoto had just one elemental type, which is fire, he was able to unleash a massive range of techniques, both in his Shikai and Bankai, devastating, overwhelming moves that prove how time and experience play a massive role in unlocking more Zanpakuto powers. And the same can be said for Shunsui Kyoraku. His Zanpakuto is one of my personal favorite ones because of its depth and complexity. Sure, it may not be on Yamamoto's level, but we're still talking about someone who lived for centuries. As a result, Katen Kyokatsu has tons of abilities. Just in the Shikai alone, it has a variety of unique games. And when it comes to Bankai, Kyoraku's power are literally hacks level, making him one of the most dangerous Shinigami out there in terms of technique. And as I mentioned, guys, before, intelligence is another key factor in gaining multiple Zanpakuto abilities. For example, Urahara Kisuke as a Shinigami has an incredibly wide variety of techniques, both in Shikai and Bankai. Even though he learned Bankai in just 3 days, his powers are entirely different from one another. Even Mayuri Kurochitsu, through his scientific research, was able to modify his Zanpakuto, allowing him to acquire Bankai, and then he modified the Bankai further with multiple techniques. And all of these guys took time. On the flip side, take Aizen. Even with his genius and incredible strength, his Zanpakuto only has one ability. But to master this ability, this dangerous ability, you will need time. Without speaking about the fact that Aizen has mastered all other Shinigami arts, including Kido and Shinpo, which themselves require years of training. So now, guys, when we look at Ichigo's case, we would see there are actually a lot of reasons why he didn't develop a wide range of Zanpakuto techniques or more a flexible combat style. So the biggest factor is time. Ichigo never thought of becoming a Shinigami, he never planned to enter the Shinigami Academy or become a captain someday. He never had aspirations to master Bankai, none of that. All of this was thrown at him by circumstances. and his contact with people from that world, most notably Rukia. So when he awakened his Shinigami powers, it wasn't out of ambition, it came purely from his desire to protect others. And because of that, he never had any real time to learn the basics in a formal setting. He learned everything in battle. He had just a few days of training with Orohara Kiisuke, where he learned his Zanpakuto's name, awakened his powers, and met the old man Zangetsu. And later in Soul Society, during his fight with Zaraki, Ichigo encountered White for the first time and began to understand some basics of Shikai. And then during his Bankai training, he learned the one core technique of his Zanpakuto, Getsuga Tensho. And from there we learned that this technique, Getsuga Tensho, actually has different levels. For example, in its Shikai form, the Getsuga is yellow, but in the Bankai, it was White who unleashed it himself during his takeover of Ichigo in his fight against Byakuya, and it came out as a black Getsuga Tensho. And later on, Ichigo gained the mask, which boosted his power significantly. But again, it was still within the same frame, just powering up the Getsuga Tensho. And then came the Dangai form, where Ichigo used the Getsuga Tensho at an even higher level. At that point, he became the technique itself. But in the final arc, guys, it became clear that all the foundational elements that usually allow a Shinigami to bond deeply with their Zanpakuto and thus develop multiple techniques were simply not present in Ichigo's case. Why? Because the figure claiming to be his Zanpakuto wasn't his Zanpakuto at all. It was actually his Quincy power. And as for White, who truly was his real Zanpakuto, his relationship with Ichigo was never friendly to begin with. It was always a clash between the two. Yet White had shown incredible skill when it came to wielding Zangetsu. The way he moved the sword and the way he used it, it all hinted that White was the real Zanpakuto. He was the one who should have taught Ichigo the real fundamentals of fighting with Zangetsu. And that's why only after Ichigo discovered his true powers, he was finally able to develop Getsuga Tensho further. With his two new swords, he could now unleash the technique from either the large blade or the smaller one. He could even merge the two blades to unleash a technique called Getsuga Jujutsu. And in his final battle, Ichigo even combined a Grand Ray Zero with the Getsuga Tensho. And this shows us clearly that once Ichigo understood his true powers, he immediately began developing new techniques. Sure, they still are connected to the Getsuga Tensho itself, but that's still a noticeable growth, especially considering the very short amount of time Ichigo had compared to other Shinigamis. But on the other hand, guys, the real issue here is that Ichigo never fully tapped into his other powers to form entirely new techniques. For example, his Fullbring powers, even there, he still used it to enhance the Getsuga Tensho, or his Quincy powers. I don't think that's where there was a real potential for Ichigo to learn Quincy techniques from the old man Zangetsu, and he can teach him other techniques and combat styles. But unfortunately that didn't happen. That's why I don't think that kind of development is going to happen in part 4, for example, simply because of time issues. But I do see it as a very likely in any events that take place after 12 years as a time skip. So with that much time ahead, it would be more than enough for Ichigo to finally develop his powers and use techniques that can go beyond Getsuga Tensho. In the end, guys, what do you think about Ichigo and the Getsuga Tensho? Can we see other new techniques in the future? Tell me guys your opinions in the comments, and see you in my next video.